How you doing, Alan?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
You got it. I stared at that tweet like Greg Norman stared at the back of your head.
That was too easy. That was just way too easy.
I'm sorry. I'm into the low-hanging fruit, I guess. What's happening? What do you know right now as we're chatting here at 2 Eastern Time, Alan?
Yeah, well, I mean, Tiger's plane has left Florida, the modern wonder of tracking people's private aircraft.
That's right.
So we know he's en route. It was always I was a little nervous because, hey, his back could flare up or his plane could break down, but he's coming. It's interesting. I've been talking to different people in the game, and it sounds like not every player in the field has been invited to this meeting. It's more of a select group that appears to have been handpicked by Tiger, and so that's another layer of intrigue, because one of the fundamental issues in this whole thing is that there's no players union on the PGA Tour. There's no collective bargaining. They don't really speak with one voice. Now they have various layers of representation, but ultimately it's a little bit of a free-for-all out there, and the top players' concerns are very different. Say the top 20 players on tour would be the stars who make most of the money. Their concerns are very different from the guys who are, say, 50 to 150 on the money list. Those dudes are just trying to keep their job and, might maybe buy a second house somewhere fancy and possibly fly private occasionally, but they're in a different stratosphere. But there's a lot more of the middle-class guys, to use that term with a wink. So this is some of the tension. And, Phil Mickelson made that point to me in my book that, he thought there should be almost a whole different apparatus for governing the tour. And Phil's idea was modeled on the U.S. Congress, which is funny because anyone who looks at Congress as a blueprint for efficiency, but where essentially the top players are like the Senate, and everybody else is kind of like the House of Representatives, and you let the lesser players come up with the ideas, but nothing happens without the approval and the tweaking of the Senate. And so it just speaks to this tension within the game where the tour it's the stars who move the needle, and they're the ones who are the most important in this thing, but they're outnumbered by the guys who are just trying to keep their job and the journeymen. And so it's hard to affect change, and it puts Commissioner Jay Monahan in a tough spot because who is he really representing? And if this meeting today is not for everybody, that just kind of brings home this schism on tour and within the game itself. So just another little layer of intrigue in all of this.
So let me take part of your tweets one at a time. Boycott major championships, meaning keep the LIV players out, or tell the LIV players they should be allowed in, because then that would dovetail into the third part of your tweet about a compromise. What do you mean by major championship boycott? What do you mean?
Yeah, one tweet is a little reductive. So that's been an idea that's been floated by Davis Love and others, that ultimately so much hinges on the major championships, because what the LIV players have exposed is that for a lot of these guys, the week in, week out tournaments aren't that important to them. And whether they're playing a LIV event in Portland or they're playing the Greater Hartford Open, they don't have a big emotional attachment to that tournament. It's just a chance to make money, which is by definition is what professional golfers do. And so they're basically, there's, for some of these guys, they might like Pebble Beach, they might like Riviera, but it's not enough to have kept them on the PGA Tour. But we all know that the major championships are very important to all these players, and how they can get into the majors is going to be a fundamental issue that the game is going to face here in the coming months. And so the thinking is, if the vast body of PGA Tour players goes to the governing bodies and says, we're not going to play the majors if you let the LIV guys in, that puts pressure on Augusta National and the USGA and others to try and finesse a way to keep those guys out of the tournaments. Now, I don't think that the players are organized enough to actually get a whole boycott off the ground, and some of them would never want to miss those opportunities anyway. So I don't think it's a very viable possibility, but the fact that it's being discussed tells you about sort of the siege mentality that some of the players on the PGA Tour have, and how high the stakes have been raised in this whole thing. So it's a discussion point, and a very veteran player it's not Davis Love, has been saying like he thinks it's going to happen. I don't agree, but it's a talking point in the game right now, and so that's something that has to get hashed out. Jay Monahan's future, the other part of that tweet, I mean, he's been in a tough spot, the commissioner of the PGA Tour. Like, he's outgunned, obviously. Nobody can compete with the Saudi money. He's been honest about that. And so he's tried a couple other tacks. First, he went for the moral argument. No one ever has to apologize for being a PGA Tour member. And he's trying to shame the players about taking the Saudi money. But obviously that's not a very convincing argument. And so many have taken the money. And so then they've tried to pivot towards it's about legacy, it's about history. Well, again, that was not a very compelling argument to the players. Like, they're chasing the money. That's what they do. So Monahan's been very reactive, and he's just been playing defense this whole time. He kind of famously has refused to engage with Greg Norman or the LIV folks to even have a dialogue, which is looking very short-sighted now. And so there's some feeling that if there's any chance for a larger compromise, which of course is the third part of that tweet, that Monahan might have to be a sacrificial lamb in all of this, because when you villainize the other side, it becomes very difficult to negotiate with them. But if you brought in a new commissioner, they could kind of wipe the slate clean and try and forge some path to reunifying the game.
What is Tiger's role? Sounds like he's playing the role of commissioner. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, he's become a shadow commissioner in all of this. And it's interesting, Tiger Woods cares very deeply about his legacy. And I think he sees that the entire tour is facing this existential threat. And if all the top players leave the tour, then all of a sudden PGA Tour wins going forward become devalued. And he doesn't want anything to besmirch his legacy. And also, it's clear that he's not going to be able to play much competitive golf going forward. We'll be lucky if we see him a few times a year, if that. And so what is Tiger going to do with his free time? I mean, he wants to be an elder statesman in the game. And there's a very clear line in the sand now. If you go over to LIV, you're jeopardizing being a honorary starter at the Masters. You're jeopardizing being a Ryder Cup captain. And so Tiger, he wants those things. They're becoming more important to him. Be a President's Cup captain, running his own tournament at LA Open and other possibilities like that. So he's really staked his legacy on continuing with the PGA Tour and trying to maximize all those different opportunities. And of course, there's always been this polarity between Tiger and Phil and Mickelson, and now Phil's gone the other direction. And I'm sure Tiger's enjoying that bit of it too, because Tiger, in a lot of people's eyes, is the good guy who's trying to save the game, and that's got to feel really good for someone who's been enmeshed in so many controversies throughout his career. So, yeah, Tiger's pushing hard. I mean, he's definitely trying to be the conscience to a lot of these top players and trying to steer them in the direction of staying loyal to the tour.